And that's why I believe in you, because that is the greatest purpose. It's to love. Honest. It sounds corny, whatever you want to say. I don't care. I love people because there is freedom and power in loving people.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we have the crazy belief that creating success and happiness is a daily conscious effort, which is why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week. I'm your host, Brandon Beecham, and each and every Wednesday, you can tune in to hear me interview a different consciousness changemaker that is out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. On the other 4 weekdays, you can tune in to myself and my co-host, Dalian, giving interpretations of our favorite thought-provoking quotes, sharing a bit of inspiring or mysterious news, taking questions from the audience, and digging into any other mind-expansive topics that will help keep your soul fed by tuning you in to positive vibrations on a regular basis. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on the show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's interview episode, I am extremely excited to have Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. here with me on the show. Miguel skillfully carries the family torch that's deeply rooted in the ancient Toltec tradition, which was passed down to him from his grandmother and very famous father, Don Miguel Ruiz, author of the hugely popular book, The Four Agreements. However, not one to live in the shadow, Miguel Jr. has definitely taken his place on the world stage as another wise teacher of the Toltec tradition by authoring several best-selling books of his own, most recently, The Mastery of Self, a Toltec Guide to Personal Freedom. Hello, Miguel. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brandon. Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I am excellent. It's really, really great to connect with you. Been looking forward to this for quite some time. So thanks for taking the time to chat with me.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show. It's a real honor. Thank you so much for the opportunity. How's everything with you this morning?
You know what? I've got my Yoda coffee cup here with me, and nice. I could see you had the same, so I think I'm doing good. Yeah. So just to jump right in, the way I like to always open the show up with my interviews, you're in an elevator. The gal next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
My family.
Now that was short, sweet, and impactful. Okay. You've got 9.5 floors left. No. Very cool.
It's the bond with my family that I enjoy. It's nothing. There's no bond like it, And family sometimes is that blood relations as well as my friends, whom I consider family as well. They may not be related, but the bond is that strong that they are members of this family. That my kids call them uncle or aunt, and it's what makes life so much fun, enjoyable. It's this thing that to me, the whole point of life is to enjoy life, and
absolutely.
And it starts by enjoying being me, and that allows me to enjoy being around the people in my life. It's a wonderful experience, and I very much am grateful for the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. It makes me think of a dear friend of mine, Shane, who always is talking about who's in his soul family. And I think there is some great truth to that. You have these people, even him as an example, we met maybe 3 years or so ago, but even prior to that, my business partner at the time had met him before I did, and was like, I just met your future, best friend, and nice. Sure enough, it's one of those things where you come in contact with people, blood or no blood, where it's just that soul recognition, that connection that is that goes beyond just, of course, immediate blood family, which are always deep ties, one way or another, it seems. There's some great lesson there. And in your case, of course, there's so much rich family history that it continues to unfold for all of us who really have enjoyed following, of course, starting with your father's work and then even educating us a bit about your grandmother in the book Toltec, Art of Life and Death. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Barbara Emrys, the co-author with your father on that book learning about your grandmother, many months ago. And
isn't that a great book?
Oh, it really is. It's such a journey. It is such a journey. Highly recommend it. It's such a departure from, of course, the Four Agreements, which your father is so well known for, and it's such a definitely enjoyable. If you love a good story with a lot of deep insight, highly recommend that one. And speaking of all this family stuff, I know you had kind of a rocky journey on this sort of spiritual path, I guess you would say, that you're on. Can you tell us a little bit about how that journey has been for you?
Well, it's been a fun and interesting one, of course. I grew up with juxtapositions, dualities all the time. My father being, before he was Don Miguel Ruiz, he was Dr. Miguel Ruiz, a neurosurgeon, and my grandmother, a faith healer and spiritual. Both of them are healers, but in their own different ways. I grew up in the city of San Diego and Tijuana. I consider both my hometowns because I spent my childhood in both. So I'm a border town guy and was raised in the culture of Mexico as well as the culture of the United States, and they both feel like my home to me. I live I grew up in a world of spirituality, and at the same time I achieved very well and did very well in academia. And, you can say that I engaged the family tradition because I love my family. But growing up as a teenager, like any teenager, it seemed like it belonged something in a museum. Like, what does that have to do with me in my life? It's like it's like a teenager reading a history book and not realizing the events that he or she is reading is you're living the consequences of that moment, and to a certain extent, of course. And I rebelled against it, and at the same time I engaged it because I love them. So the duality is right then and there.
Sure.
It was hard to tell anyone who my family was for a long time because there was still a weird taboo about spirituality like that in the 1980s.
Right.
And somewhere along the 1990s, it began to change. You can say I graduated from college, the bubble burst, and I'm in life and I'm working. And then you can say that came a time when I was able to understand. Like, for example, the book, The Four Agreements, came out in 1997, and I read 3 chapters into it, and I put it down because it was my dad telling me what to do all over again. That's the thing that
new angle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you grow up in it, you get to experience the process of how my dad learned it. And at first, he, the type of parent he was, the doctor was different, the apprentice student was different, the budding teacher, budding man, and then the man he came to be, and every single one of them had different styles of parenting. And you can say that by the end of it, Don Miguel Ruiz was already there. And he came basically is that point where life happened and life became my teacher. For me, my brother went through his own trials and tribulations with addiction and all that. And he writes about it in his book, My Best Friend, the Rattlesnake. And he came out through that. For me, it was different. It wasn't as traumatic as that experience that path is. And, more power to him for leaving that road with so much strong will. And healing himself in his body in that way. For me, it was different. It was all the mind. The attention, the hook. You can say the addiction was to being right. And one of the things that comes from academia and being in the university and that kind of thing, you create an ego based on that, and then you realize one day that it's all nonsense, and all of a sudden this image I created for myself doesn't exist, and you have a moment of heartbreak, and then end of a relationship, a father who has a heart attack, and all of a sudden from overnight you have to let go of your 20s and you're into your adulthood right off the bat, and he recovers, he comes back, and you're trying to go back to what you were, but you can't. You can't go back. It's the moment where you realize, wait a minute, it's not a game. It's life, and life is a wonderful adventure if you wanted to, but at the same time, if you're pretending to be something you're not, it's going to rock you and it's going to hammer you. And unfortunately, when we learn about conditional love, it is all about pretending to be something you're not, because you're afraid to love yourself just the way you are, because you're telling people around you constantly are trying to tell you that you have to be this, you have to be that, and you believe them. And I can say that I can say almost all of us go through a certain degree of that. And for me, it came with that moment where I became aware that it's an illusion. So you can say there's the image of Don Quixote that I absolutely love. And basically, I also have a tattoo of it. Mm-hmm. And I describe to people, I'm both. I am Don Quixote. I'm crazy. I have my ideas, but at least I take action on my ideas. And I'm also Sancho Panza, because I know I'm crazy, but I'll follow me just in case I'm right.
Right. And I always say all the best people are crazy anyway. So
yeah, that's how Alice puts it, because after a while we can realize that, it's when you shift your point of view and get out of what people consider conditional love, and you see life from a totally different point of view, where you begin to see life as is. For some reason, that's considered radical, but in reality, it's just what is truth. Life is beautiful just the way it is, and what changes and morphs is the dream of the planet, the way we perceive ourselves, the way we perceive others, and we constantly trying to make the others fit what we think we should be. And that's the consequence of conditional love. We only see what we want to see, but never see who is right in front of us. So to me, that was my path, letting go of those filters that created those distortions.
Yeah. And what a relatable path it is. I mean, it's such a plague almost, it seems, in society, trying to fit into the box of what people think we should or shouldn't be, as opposed to just accepting life as it is. And so I applaud you for seeing through that illusion, so to speak. And it's funny you mentioned your brother's book, because, I always, a lot of times talk about stories of synchronicity and so forth on the show. And sure enough, I decided to go camping. There's a gathering up just outside of LA in Mount Baldy called 5 Points Gathering a few days ago. And I just got back, and I set up my tent, there with my friend. And sure enough, as soon as I set up my tent, first time in my life, what comes slithering through the bushes right next to my tent? A rattlesnake. Oh, wow. And people are freaking out, it's like 5 feet from my tent. And I'm like thinking, I'm interviewing you in a few days, right? And of course, I just kind of laughed to myself. I'm like, and everyone's like, oh no, rattlesnake, kill it or this or that. And I'm like, no, that's my friend, the rattlesnake. It's okay. So I think it's really fascinating how, your brother, of course, and I actually had the pleasure of seeing him give a talk at Lucidity Festival a couple years ago. And so I think it's really such an interesting, beautiful sort of family story that's unfolding with you and your brother, stepping up into this sort of following in your father's footsteps and doing such a great job with your own teaching. And maybe for those who aren't too familiar, you could give a little background in, this sort of ancient Toltec. Who are the ancient Toltecs, and sort of this, where does this wisdom originate?
Well, you can say that it comes from the central of Mexico. Over 500 years ago, the Toltec were a civilization, and that spanned a millennia. From generation to generation, it changed. Of course, it started in Teotihuacan, then to Tula and places like that. It's a civilization that in some ways was a nomad. It kept creating new cities. And if you know anything about Mesoamerican cities, they're all made of stones, which is kind of interesting how they just kept changing and rebuilding pyramids. And with the expansion of the Aztec Empire or the expansion of the Spanish Empire, the Toltec ceased to exist as a civilization, because that's what happens when a conquering happens and you lose your central. First it was the Aztecs, and then came the Spanish. And after that, you can say that it became an oral tradition, a philosophy. Right. A philosophy that is taught from one generation to another. there's people out there that teach it as it was over 500 years ago, and in their own small community or family. And then there's families that adapt it. Each generation adapts it to its own environment. That's where my family comes in. My family comes from a small little town called Juanacatlan, Jalisco, and it came, which is just outside of Guadalajara. And the thing about oral tradition is that it goes back as far as living memory, which is my grandmother's grandfather, Domesticio Macias, who you read about in the Toltec Life and Death. Yeah,
right.
He's the one who says that we are descendants of the Toltecs. I don't know the name of his father. I just know his name. And when he taught it to a small group of people, just a few family members, because it was still somewhat taboo, like the remnants of the Inquisition was still around. So it was still kind of taboo to talk about, even though the Inquisition no longer existed, the taboo of it is still there. So he taught it to a few people. And then his son, being a military man and a musician, found a way to teach it through music. So he taught his apprentices, family members, and dear friends through music. And then his daughter, Madre Sarita, my grandmother, she practiced it through faith healing, but she had a desire to share this with the whole community. You can say that she just didn't want to just share it with the family; she wanted to share it with everyone. So when she landed in San Diego, because my family was a military family at that point, and they moved from town to town because of wherever my grandpa was assigned, whichever base he was given. And eventually, somehow, they managed to all be together in Tijuana. My grandmother was in San Diego in the 1960s, and she opened up a small little temple in San Diego, California, in Barrio Logan, where she gave sermons and lectures to the community, not just faith healing, but she decided to teach this to the community. And fast forward to 2007, San Diego County created the San Diego Women's Hall of Fame some years prior, but she was inducted into that Hall of Fame in 2007. Wow. And she did so because she kept the tradition alive. So the community honored her for that, Sara Macias Vasquez. So this, you can sometimes say people say that I'm following in my father's footsteps, but I'm not. Actually, both him and I and my brother Jose, all three of us are following and continuing my grandmother's dream. This is my grandmother's dream. She had this desire to share it with everyone. And if she opened the gates, my father blew those gates wide open, writing the book, The Mastery of Self, the Mastery of Love, the Four Agreements, the Voice of Knowledge. Sometimes I've done that a couple of times, confused the Mastery of Self with the Mastery of Love.
Yes.
I've done it a couple of times.
Understandably so.
Yeah, similar titles. But, the thing about my father is that being a neurosurgeon, he came from Western medicine, and he knew Western language. And when he began to apprentice, he began to use the old Toltec tradition, the old symbols, the old imagery. And when he began to share it, he found that if he taught it the old way, there was a lot of fanaticism that came with it. A lot of people were very fanatical about it. It's so easy to create fanaticism from that. So he decided to clean it up. And what he means by that is just put it into a language that is common sense, something relatable to all of us. Yeah. So he began to let go of some of the Toltec symbols and adapt it to stories and symbologies and lessons to reflect our everyday life. So you could say the Four Agreements, for example, in the book, The Four Agreements, the introduction is a very old Toltec story of the smoky mirror, but the rest of it is in a language that we interact with every day. And I think that's the main reason why it's such a universal appeal, at least at least in this world, has been translated to over 36 languages and done very well for itself.
Right.
And it is all because it's in a language that we can all relate. It's not specific, or because that's the thing. When in the 1980s, people used to come to it, listen to my father and my grandmother speak, but it was more. They really weren't into the lessons. They were using it for their personal importance. It's like, how can I use this and become a Nahual myself? They all want to be Carlos Castaneda, and or Don Juan. So, there's that imagery, of course. And then, of course, there was students who really were looking for something to help them. And in that point of view, that's the essence. These teachings is about healing the body, healing the mind, healing this emotional body, healing the self, healing the inner relationship within myself in order to enjoy life. You can say that both me and my brother have used this tradition in order to heal ourselves emotionally, to heal, because even though we were born into this family, we still lived in the world. We lived in Tijuana. We lived in San Diego. We are surrounded by people living up to an image. Like, for example, growing up, we were surrounded by hippies and we didn't stand that. So both Jose went to heavy metal and I went to goth. Wearing black and all that.
How far away from the hippies can I get?
Yes, because that was the rebellion. If there was something we were rebelling against, it was that imagery.
Right.
We Jose into heavy metal and punk rock, and me with the goth music and synth pop and a new wave. Mod. Right. But even then, we were trained. Like we talked at the very beginning of the show, that we were trying to be something we're not. We were like my father says, if I don't domesticate you, someone else will.
Right.
If we don't domesticate our children, someone else will domesticate them, and they will be ruthless. And we will believe that imagery. Like the whole idea of growing up, the worst thing someone can call anyone was a wannabe. You're a wannabe. Right. And to a certain degree, that still exists between the young people. I get to witness that with some of the kids around the neighborhood. The whole concept of the wannabe, you're trying to pretend something you're not. You're not for real with all that kind of thing. And that's just the result. You can see domestication all over it. Domestication is that system of reward and punishment by which we model the behavior of an individual. So for me, you can say that every book that my family has written tackles that problem. That's the main problem we address, which is domestication, with its end result being conditional love. And how to heal from the wounds that conditional love has left in our life. That's what we do. That's what we teach. That's what we create. So at that point, it's not about whether we become Don Juan or Don Miguel Ruiz or Castaneda or any of those sacred images. It's about healing the body in order to be free from the tyranny of our own beliefs that subjugate our will. And that, to me, is the point of view. Also, at that point, you can say that both me and Jose let go of trying to live up to that image of the heavy metal and goth kid, even though we still listen to the music and we still go. I'm looking forward to going to see Guns N' Roses in a few weeks. That'll be great. But that's the thing. It's like we enjoy being ourselves. We made peace with our friends who are hippies. We made peace with our friends who are country. We made peace with our friends who are hip hop. We made friends with everyone, and that's it. It's like listening to music and not caring what genre it is. You're just listening to the expression in the heart that you hear that's coming out of the speakers. Or if you're live and watching a band play, you get to enjoy the experience of them. And that's beauty, like listening to a beat poet telling you their point of view, and then listening to a hip hop artist telling you his or her point of view. And it's all the beautiful expression of humanity sharing their experience and their perception of life. How beautiful is that?
Absolutely. And it's something that I often say. Of course, it's so easy for people to fall into judgment of things that are different, as you've sort of referenced. Hey, I don't relate to this or that style or that music or, this lifestyle, whatever it may be. And what I think the big mistake so many people make is overlooking how important it is, that contrast. Imagine if everyone was, Miguel Ruiz Jr. It would be a pretty boring place. You're a pretty extraordinary individual, but if there were 7 billion of you, it would be a pretty boring place, right? So it's that contrast that really helps to define us. And instead of resisting what's different, if, as more and more people become aware and embrace it, it really makes all the difference, right?
Well, yeah, because it's the thing, like, people are used to that. People, like they say, in order to practice the 4 agreements, I have to have everyone practice the 4 agreements. It makes it easier. But it's what we're used to. We're so attached and so used to conditional love that we will corrupt everything. We corrupted music. We corrupted fashion. We corrupted, something like, I do know people who will corrupt even the way they eat, the way they drink their coffee, the way they listen to their music, the way they, but to see the world like a child, is to be in awe of the world again, to allow life to amaze us, to keep us in wonder, to keep asking the questions, like a child keeps asking, why is this? Why is that? What is this? Yeah. Why, who, what, when, where? We're used to. And then somewhere along the line, we've gotten so attached to it that we stop asking questions because we don't want to hear the answer, just in case it moves my little happy island. And that's what attachment does, like it shuts down our perception. Yeah. But like you said, there are 7 billion human beings living life in this very moment, which means there are 7 billion different ways by which you can live life. 7 billion unique ways, and none of them are the same, even though we look similar and some choices are similar. We're all dramatically different because each one of us sees life from our own unique point of view. And that's just with humans. If we add plants and animals, then it's beyond that. It's an incredible, life goes in different directions. And in order to be harmony, it comes from respect. The mutual respect we have for one another allows us not only to have compassion for one another, it allows us to create with harmony. But it all starts within ourselves. Once we have that harmony within ourselves, once we have that harmony in the relationship between me and me, because you can say that if I'm the voice that's talking in my own mind, who's listening? I am. Well, if I'm the one who's listening, who's talking? I am. Right. And that's the relationship between me and me. We call it mind and body. There's this harmony where the mind tries to domesticate me, because we humans are the only beings that are able to self-domesticate. When we domesticate an animal, it only is domesticated for as long as the domesticator is actively domesticating that animal, that creature. But when our domesticator stops domesticating us, we continue to domesticate ourselves by continuing to agree with those conditions, by agreeing with those stereotypes, by agreeing with that pigeonholing. We continue to believe those limiting beliefs. And that's what creates all the division, because part of being worthy of love is to be right. And part of it is, if you're wrong, then you're worthy of the scrutiny, the rejection, that rejection that we get for getting the answer wrong. And if we base ourselves on that, then of course we're fighting. Of course we're arguing. Of course we're constantly trying to not only persuade, but subjugate the will of another in order for them to see our point of view. And that's where peace ends. That's where all that ends. So in order for us to find peace again, we end that argument within ourselves and we begin to live life from our own unique point of view, which is the relationship between me and me. To forgive ourselves for ever saying yes to those conditions, for saying yes to those things that divide my relationship with the people I love, to forgive myself for ever using music to create a division between me and my friends, or fashion, or the way I eat, or the way I dress, or with the way I vote.
Right.
I look at those things and I realize that disharmony ends with me. in order to bring harmony within myself, to respect my own yes, to respect my own no, to respect my own will allows me to respect the will of another. It's like this. That's like I like to say, in order for me to learn to say namaste to you, I first learned to say namaste to myself. In order for me to know what it feels like to respect my own son, because that experience, that awareness is what allows me to know what it means to say, I respect your son. Your son in me respects the son in you. So that's what allows me to give a powerful namaste to you, because I know what it feels like and I know what it means. So that harmony that we want to see in the world starts within ourselves.
All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Yeah, without that, there's really nowhere to go, right? I mean, if you're not, if I've known people, I can, even think of an ex-girlfriend from years ago who had so much love and kindness and goodness, and it was always directed out to the world. But when it came to self-love, that was the biggest hang-up. There was this lack of self-love, and it was crippling. It caused so many insecurities and problems, and just stopped this sort of kept this butterfly as a caterpillar, as I like to kind of say. And I suppose everyone, figures this out in their own time, that, finding that peace and love with yourself is sort of the foundation of everything that's goes into building a healthy life or dream. And, speaking of dream, of course, that's something you reference in your book, life being a dream, and that's part of the Toltec tradition. Can you talk a little bit about that concept, life being a dream, personal dream versus planetary dream?
Sure. Well, in the Toltec tradition, the main function of the mind is to dream. That's the main function of the mind. To us, dreaming simply means to perceive and to project. That right now I am awake and I'm perceiving 360 degrees around me. I'm perceiving with my eyes, I'm perceiving with my ears, I'm perceiving with every single nerve ending that surrounds my body, that allows me to, as I'm looking out the windows and I'm looking at the trees, I'm also able to feel the seat that I'm sitting on and the warmth that's coming from that. I'm able to feel the air conditioning behind me, and I'm able to hear your voice that's coming from a long way. And I'm perceiving 360 degrees around me. Right now, what I'm perceiving is light bouncing off matter, which is the trees, the sofa, the computer, and it's bouncing off matter, which is what we know as tonal in Nahuatl. And I'm perceiving light being reflected into my eyes, and sound reflecting into my ear, and vibrations to my body. I'm awake. I am dreaming, and at the same time, I'm projecting. I'm filling my diaphragm with air, and letting that air out through the trachea, the vocal cords in my mouth and my throat, and muscles in my mouth make sounds in English in order for you and I, to understand each other.
Right.
And I'm also dreaming when I'm asleep. In my sleep, if I see those trees or this computer, it's not really light that's bouncing off, because there's no matter. And because there's no matter, time is non-linear and there's no sense of space. It just morphs and changes. What is it that I'm perceiving when I'm asleep? I have no idea. But what I do know is that I'm constantly perceiving. I'm the constant point of perception when I am awake and when I am asleep. And my reason is this compass that allows me to tell the difference between the two. Because my mind is so powerful that even though I am looking at that tree that's in front of me, I can imagine you because I have the memory of talking to you prior to the interview on the video, and imagine you in front of your microphone with your cup of coffee that's in the shape of a Yoda, and I can look at
noticed
that.
Yeah,
And I'm looking at that. I can imagine that as my eyes hasn't departed that tree. I'm looking at the tree, and I'm also I'm imagining you, and my reason is this thing that tells me to tell the difference between the two. My perception of the tree is true because the tree is there. You, at this moment in my imagination, are a figment of my imagination. All I have to do to really see you is turn on the camera, and there you are. And then light bounces off me. So you can say from that point of view that my reason is this compass that allows me to tell the difference between the truth and the projection that my mind creates, that image, that daydream, that hallucination, whatever you want to call it, which means my mind is incredibly powerful. That's what we know as the individual dream. And like I said before, the individual dream is really manifested in the relationship with myself, which is if I'm the one who's talking in my mind, who's listening, well, I am. Well, if I'm the one listening, who's talking? I am. Mm-hmm. So that's me. That's the individual dream, the relationship between me and me. I am not this body. I'm not this mind, but I am the energy that animates both. I am the whole. That's the individual dream. The dream of the planet. The main function of your mind is to dream. The main function of everyone listening is to dream, which is to perceive and to project. And when we interact with one another, we create the dream of us. This bond, you can call it that. This bond only exists for as long as both you and I say yes. If you say no or I say no, this bond ceases to exist, which means it only exists while we both say yes. The word yes simply represents that moment where we choose to use the energy that animates this mind, that animates this body to manifest something. And when we both say yes to something, we will create it. And to respect you is to respect your no. When we say no, it's that moment where we choose not to use this energy to manifest a single thing. So to respect you is to respect your no. Your no is just as powerful as your yes. And I'm only able to do that as I respect my own no, my own will. My no, my yes are just as powerful. And that's what allows me to see you as my equal. You are my equal because you're alive at the same time and you can go in any direction in life. That's what makes you an equal. Mm-hmm. We're alive. And because we're alive, we are both human with this capacity to use our mind and use our body, we have a bond that we have when we shake hands, and then there's a bond when our minds meet. And when the minds meet, that's when the dream of planet begins. Because it's as small as you and I, two minds talking to one another. And it's as big as 7 billion people interacting with everyone. So it's huge. It's a mitote. 1,000 voices all talking at the same time. In this case, 7 billion voices all talking at the same time. And it's a beautiful thing. You can see how it moves. And it's both the yin and the yang. You can both see the good and the bad. You can see the nightmare and the harmony played out at the same time in real time. One of the nice things about the internet and modern television and all that kind of thing is that you get to see the nightmare that is humanity and the beauty and the harmony that is humanity played out at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's being reflected inside our own mind because it's happening within ourselves. Within me is the perfect nightmare, the image of your friend who has a hard time loving herself, and the harmony, which is the image of a person who loves themselves just the way they are. Now, mind you, it's a difference between loving yourself with ego and loving yourself unconditionally. The function of ego is to keep the illusion alive. So that you can see domestication and conditional love all over it. I only wanted to see what I want to see. That's love through ego. I love the illusion. Love unconditionally is to let go of the illusion and accept yourself as you are. It's the difference between seeing yourself as a symbol with a definition and experiencing yourself as life. And experiencing yourself, your life, is when you really see yourself and feel yourself and be yourself. You're alive. And you're the constant point. This infinite possibility that can go in any direction in life. We are the sum of every choice we've ever made, but we're also the youngest we will ever be at this very moment. How do we want to live the rest of our lives? So you can say that is the individual dream. That's it, also interacting with the dream of the planet, which means we're co-creating this dream together. And we have a choice. Are we going to use our word to continue to create the nightmare that is in our own mind and share that nightmare with everyone? Or are we going to share the harmony that's within our own mind and heart and share that with everyone? It's always a choice. And that's the beauty of it.
How do you recommend that someone obviously you have so many people that are sort of waking up to this idea that life is a dream and we're creating it, right? With our beliefs and our actions and how we, how much love, self-love we're able to sort of tap into and so forth. Is there any thoughts on how one would wake up in the dream? And obviously the more people that do wake up in the dream, the sweeter it's going to get, right?
Well, that's what you think, but it's 7 billion different directions in life. Everyone will live dramatically different, and harmony and respect is always a choice. It's free will. That's what respect is. And you can say that in order to let go of that illusion is to become aware of one truth. This body that you see, or the body that you are, will one day be dead. Which means you are not this body. You are the energy that animates this body. And if you understand the concept that you're not this body, you can also understand that you are also not this mind. You are the energy that gives life to both. When did life start? It started a long time ago. Our life didn't start at conception. It didn't start at birth. It started long before, because the ovum and the sperm that gave us life was already alive. So life was already there. The only thing that was created was a single point of perception. And in that single point of perception, there is the energy that animates this body and animates this mind. If you see this point of view, that you see yourself as energy that moves this body, that moves this mind, then you can see that the energy that animates this leg that I use to move this leg, the energy I use to move my arm, is the same energy I use to create a thought. At the root of every belief I have in my belief system, there is a yes that gives it life, that gives it power, that gives it meaning. If I decide to change that yes into a no, that belief will cease to exist. You see, a belief only exists for as long as I believe it. As soon as I change my mind and no longer believe it, it ceases to exist. That's what we know as the illusion. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, the truth exists whether you believe in it or not. Life exists. But if we're so attached to our beliefs and we let those beliefs dictate our action, then we're completely invested in the illusion. What I mean by that is that we're allowing a belief that only exists for as long as I say yes to it, to dictate my choices, to dictate my will. At that point, my will is not free. I let a belief tell me what to say yes to and what to say no to. That is the illusion of personal freedom. But to have personal freedom is to be aware that I'm the one that I'm saying yes to and saying no to. My yes and my no is my will. To have free will is to be able to say yes and no with the complete freedom of life. And that's personal freedom. That's free will. That's the freedom we all work towards, to become aware that I'm the one that controls the energy that animates this body, that animates this mind, because I am that energy. So if I begin to see that and become aware that a belief only exists for as long as I say yes to it, then I can see the moment where I'm not the mind. I'm the energy that gives power to my mind. Right. And so you can say from that point of view, For as long as I am alive, everything is possible. And because I'm alive, I can change a yes into a no or a no to a yes. I can't go back in the past and change a yes and a no because life no longer exists in the past. It only exists in my memory, and it probably didn't happen the way I think it happened.
Right.
And the future doesn't exist yet. It's the consequences of the choices I make at this very moment, which means the only place where I'm able to express my will, to express myself, is in this present moment. This present moment that moves with me from the moment I am conceived until the moment of my last breath. If you see that as the single point of perception. But if you see it as a whole, then the energy that animates that tree, the energy that animates my children's bodies, is the same energy that animates me, which is we're all one.
Right.
You can see it from that point of view, from a general point of view. But here's the thing. For as long as we're in this body, I only control to the tips of my own fingers. I don't control the will of a tree. I don't control the will of my children, nor my wife, nor yours. I only control to the tips of my fingers, just as you are only able to control to the tips of yours. So that point of view, of course, we're going to see life from a single point of perception because we're perceiving life from this mind, from this brain, from this body.
This vantage point. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm not perceiving life from the cell that's in my fingers, but I can feel my fingers when I scratch it and touch them and hold them and give pressure. I can perceive that as a whole. So the moment where I become aware that I control my beliefs, that I give them power, the moment my beliefs no longer have power over me. It's like Eleanor Roosevelt said. She says, "No one can make me feel inferior without my consent," which means it's the image of Buddha and Siddhartha when they shoot arrows at him and he turns and doesn't give those arrows permission to hurt him, and he turns them into roses. He doesn't give permission to those arrows to hurt him at all. Just like my dad says, don't take things personal, meaning I don't take responsibility for the will of another. I only control my own will, and I do not give permission to those words to hurt me. Well, it's the moment when I realize that those beliefs that have been hurting me, those beliefs that have been subjugating me, I've given permission, and I revoke that permission. And then I realized that, my dad talks about the parasite in the 4 agreements. Well, the parasite is basically the mind that has become the domesticator. So in order to make the mind stop being the domesticator, we stop assigning the mind to be the domesticator. Forgive me, mind. I used you to domesticate me, and you're relieved of that duty. But you're still my ally, and you're going to allow me to perceive life as is.
Right.
And to me, that's it. That's been my journey.
Yeah, very powerful perspective indeed. One of the things that you talked about, of course, was that we don't really have control over those outside of ourselves. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on, people showing up as you expect. We are, as you referenced, all connected. And, it's all one, right? And the consciousness, the energy that animates me is the energy and consciousness that animates you. It's taken on 2 different sort of perspectives to view reality through. And there is some level of attachment at some level, right?
Oh,
and
course.
Especially when we're mixing it up, right?
Yeah.
So do you feel like sort of the maybe a next phase of our personal growth as we learn how to really become the mastery of self, that we also then are able to affect how our children are showing up to some degree, or, those that we bump up against that appear to be, external?
Well, let me describe it to you this way. When my wife found out we were going to have a boy, she had a very strong emotional reaction. She said, "I only know girls. What am I going to do with a boy? How am I going to teach a boy how to respect women?"
Right.
And I looked at her and says, "Honey, there's no amount of lectures or sermons that are going to work. He's going to learn to respect women by watching me respect you."
Right.
And that's really the way we teach our children and other people. You see, I don't control the perception of my children. They're in control of that. And that's what I celebrate. That's the beauty of
you're influencing it, right? And that by being that great example, you, in a sense, are passively influencing in a good way, I would say, maybe.
I'm just giving them a reference. I'm not influencing them in any way, shape, or form. They're the ones that decide to agree with me or not agree with me. For example, I grew up in the 80s, which means I grew up with a couple of different role models of how to respect women. I can use my father, or I can use Two Life Crew.
There's yin and yang for you.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if I am attached to the way my father did it or to Two Life Crew, then I'm never going to see the relationship I am in. So if the way I learned is by applying either one, and my girlfriend either enjoying one or hating the other, which means I let life teach me through consequence.
Right.
Now, mind you, to behave like Two Life Crew in my life wasn't at all helpful. It only lasted a day. It didn't go further. But the lessons I learned from my father has allowed me to enjoy my relationship with my wife that's been around for 12 years now.
Right.
And it's one of those things. Now, here's the thing. My father was that reference, but the person who taught me how to be in relationship with my wife was me and my wife. We both figured out what worked. We both figured out what we liked and what we didn't like. Did my father influence me? You can say the reference there is that in that moment of choice, I remembered that I had a choice, and I remembered his words, I remember his actions, and I also remembered his mistakes. And I chose to use what I learned. And really, that's really it. I choose to use what I learned. At that point, I realized that the truth is that I don't control nor influence my kids in any way, shape, or form. They pay attention to what they want to pay attention to. An example. Me and my little girl were playing the game of who's going to blink first. So we're looking into each other's eyes, and she loses right off the bat. But I'm still looking at her. And as I'm looking at her, she eventually says, "Dad, stop looking at me." And I said, "Honey, I'm looking at you because you're beautiful." And she says, "Daddy, no, I'm not. I don't have any makeup on." And she's 4 years old when she's saying this. She's 4 years old. Wow. At that moment, I'm tempted to domesticate my daughter, just say, "No, you're beautiful just the way you are." And that's where you get temptation. That's that you can corrupt anything with domestication. So I'm aware of that. So, I realized that it's not domestication. I'm just going to plant the seed. And I'm going to say, "Honey, you're beautiful just the way you are." And she can either take it or leave it.
Right.
A few weeks later, I repeated, "Honey, you're beautiful just the way you are." And she says, "Daddy, I know, but makeup makes me look prettier." And I was impressed because she created a counter argument to me. Yeah, she told me her point of view, which is great. And that also taught me the biggest lesson is that my children, they have their own unique point of view. You see, they control their own perception to the tips of their own fingers. I don't control it. It's an illusion to think that I do. And most parents spend a lot of time trying to control it, just like a husband or wife tries to control their spouse, or a father or a son or daughter tries to control their parents or coworkers. It's an illusion. You see, no one can make me feel inferior without my permission. You see, the only way to control the will of another is to make them doubt themselves. And that's why domestication and conditioning works. It makes them doubt their own capacity to say yes and no, and then they subjugate their will. And one is going to impose their will, and every parasite will find his or her perfect host. Right. And you can see that that's what we see. What is what we know as what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm just forgot the word. It's it'll come to me. Anyways, it's the moment where you subjugate your will to such point that you have no faith in your own capacity to make a choice. And as you can see, that's what we see. That's what your question came from, to a certain degree, comes from that point of view of like trying to make someone do what we think they should do because we know better. And that's always a corruption. That point is corrupted. But as a parent, it's our job to raise children as a parent. It's our job to educate them. It's even our job to discipline them, to teach them that life has consequences. And that's the difference between conditional love. Conditional love says, if you don't live up to my expectation, you're worthy of the consequence of not feeling and not receiving my love for you. But unconditional love simply says, I love you, but I am also respect you enough for you to have the consequences of your own choices.
Right.
And that's when you allow life to teach. You see, life domesticates us, but it's different. We humans use conditional love, our emotions, our affection as the motivator to make someone do what we think they should do. But life teaches us through consequences. And there's choices that we make. So part of unconditional love for self is to take complete and full responsibility for our own will, to take full responsibility for the consequences of our own choices. That is life molding an individual, because we're living life. And what kind of consequence do I want? And from that point of view, that's what I teach my children, for them to have their own self-confidence, to make their own choices. And one of the reasons is that when they make a choice that has a positive consequence, they're very proud of themselves, meaning by that is a consequence they wanted in life. A consequence they didn't want, or a consequence that hurt, well, that one teaches them. It's like that Rocky image, you fall down, it's about standing up. Get up. And getting up teaches you the strength that you have in yourself, and the faith you have in yourself, and the capacity you have to get up when life hits you so hard, it takes you down, but you are able to still get up.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, you have a great quote on your site that I sort of jotted down here. It says, the best way to let go of illusion is choosing to accept the truth as it is, presented to us just as it is. Yeah. As it has been said, the truth will set you free. And that's really what it's all about, right? What is my life now? The collection of decisions and choices that I've made. And if I can accept those instead of running from them, it's really the path to moving through them on to maybe what you want to experience and see next. But if you're resisting what you've created, then, you're stuck, right?
Yeah, because it's about having confidence in that element of you that allows you to move forward in life, or to live life, to enjoy life, to engage life, to love. It's having confidence in yourself, and that's unconditional love. And the ability of taking responsibility is simply knowing that I am responsible for my own actions, but I am also the co-creator of this dream. And I engage the people in my life because I love them, and we build together and we construct together. We open up the conversation about the aha moments. My brother had his aha moments, and look at him. He is doing so well. He is healing himself so beautifully and become a very strong, incredible teacher. My father did the same in his own way. I did the same in my own way. It's the moment where we stop looking for a definition of self and simply allow ourselves to experience of enjoying being ourselves. You see, that's the difference. If you're looking
sort of letting go of the ego, right? I'm trying to define myself and create myself in this or that image, and just putting all that down and saying, this is what I am, this is where I am, and this is good, this is beautiful, and I love myself, right?
Yeah, this right now, this is who I am. I'm the sum of every choice that I've ever made, and this is the way I look, and I'm also the youngest I will ever be. How do I want to live my life? And the answer to that question, well, that's passion.
Yeah, absolutely. So one question that I'm very curious about is, of course, and you referenced it earlier. Am I saying it right? Nawal is how you pronounce. Yeah. And I find, for those who aren't familiar with that term, can you explain what that means, and what that means to you, and when you refer to that?
Well, Nawal is a Nahuatl word. They sound very similar, right? That means 2-3 different things. There are many definitions out there, but the 3 definitions we use in our family are these: 1, a spiritual teacher; 2nd one, a spiritual guide; But the third and foremost, Nawal is the energy that animates this body, that animates this mind. Now, mind you, tonal and Nawal. Tonal is matter. So physics 1, in order for an object to move, there needs to be a force that moves that object. Well, let me add a couple of Nahuatl terms to that. In order to move the tonal, there needs to be a Nawal that moves that tonal. It's the same concept. In order for an object to move, there needs to be a force that moves that object. Well, that force is the Nawal. We can also know it as spirit, soul, life, energy, intent. It's formless. It's what I really am. I am life. I am not this body. I'm not this mind. I am the force that animates both. And while I'm here, this body, this mind will be alive.
Right. Right. And, you know, you hear this term. I was originally introduced to this term in the Carlos Castaneda books, which you also have referenced, you know, earlier on Don Juan. And of course, there's some...
Absolutely wonderful.
Such a fascinating read, and for those of you who aren't familiar, they're very well-known books, and there's several of them. I recommend checking them out. And of course, in those books, and this is something I always, Miguel, sort of come to as any sort of interesting stories of synchronicity or positive paranormal stories. So I'm just curious, you know, with your family tradition and, you know, coming from a line of healers and so forth and adapting this term, what your thoughts are on some of those stories in the Don Juan books about, you know, his ability to transform into animals and some of these very, by traditional standards would be considered completely far out. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's called the Shapeshifter. And basically, I am formless. The energy that animates this body is formless. And it comes from an old stories. You know, the Shapeshifter is as old as... Well, it's in the Native American. It's not just in Native, but also you can see it in European and the whole Jekyll and Hyde and the stories in Asian, all that. It's formless. So I'm going to use a modern way to describe it. We all have masks. Now, in the Toltec tradition, mask is what we know as identity in this culture. Identity is how we define ourselves with a symbol and a definition. I am Mexican American. I am a Toltec. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a Californian. You know, we can grab those terms and definitions, and they're beautiful because an identity is this thing that allows us to break the ice and form relationships with people who enjoy it. For example, I'm also a runner. I'm a marathoner. I'm a half marathoner. I get to interact with people who also run races. Hey, you like races? I like races too. It's like seeing those people with a sticker, say 13.1. Now, the way I see it is like, hey, he runs, she runs, I run too. Hey, let's talk about it. Hey, what's your technique? And like, we share the stories, and it's this icebreaker, right? It's a beautiful thing. Right. But you can also see it in this way, you know, like, oh, that person runs they think they're so much better because I'm I'm better than them because I ran 50K and I ran 50 miles. I ran an ultra. At that point, we can use our identity to domesticate ourselves. And that's what we normally use. We use our identity to model our domestication for the general part. So you can see right there the corruption of it, the corruption of the mask, and using it to implement, like, for example, I said the word hippie, heavy metal, and goth earlier in the show. And I'm only using them to describe an element that people who use those three images to describe themselves in their preference in music or style and fashion. You know, right there, I say those three words and three images of people come up in our mind. You know, it's beautiful because knowledge allows us to have that because our mind is so strong and powerful. All we have to do is just say those three words, And we can immediately imagine, Kippy Shaggy or Wavy Gravy, heavy metal, Slash, and Aerosmith and Steven Tyler, Vince Neil, Goth, Bauhaus, Depeche Mode, The Cure, Robert Smith. I say those words, and I'm basically describing a certain mentality, a certain music, a certain fashion. That's what we know as an identity. That's what we know as a mask. Part of the work we do is to stop using that mask to domesticate us. That's, you could say, we go down the levels of attachment and stop using those identities and to domesticate ourselves, and we forgive ourselves. And little by little, we stop seeing ourselves with that mask. And eventually, what most people see as a spiritual point is when we take that mask off and we become aware that I am not the mask. I am not my identity. If you want to find me, it's me saying yes or no to that identity. That's real me. But the identity just encapsulates just a part of me. So I take off the mask and all that's left is me. I'm formless. Imagine I take off every single one of my masks. Meaning by that, I take off every single one of my identities, which simply means I change that yes into a no. And they cease to exist. Like a belief.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I'm formless. Now, here's the thing. My body has a form, but my mind doesn't. My mind doesn't have a form. The physical brain has a form, but my beliefs and thoughts and all that, it's formless. I am formless. Completely. Now, people still perceive me. They're projecting a mask onto me. They perceive me whether in this form or as the image they've always had of me, which means simply by interacting with them, I shapeshift in their perception. And I'm aware of it. Meaning by that, I'm aware that they see me through these eyes, and I respect them to no longer fight them, because it's not it's not under my control whether they see me as I am or they see me as they want to see me. Like someone says, I don't control the filters of someone's perception of me.
Right.
But I control myself and whether I believe them anymore. Basically, because that's the root of how we domesticate ourselves in the first place.
Right.
We use their projection of us to shape who we are, and we believed it. Now I don't believe it, but I am me. Is to see myself as the I am rather than me. I am alive. I am life. So I interact with people and I engage them just simply by the mere action. The relationship I have with my wife is different from the relationship I have with my mom, which is different from the relationship I have with my daughter. With these three people, I am the constant, but all three of them see me differently. And the emotions are expressed differently. It's love, mind you, but it's expressed differently with my daughter as it is with my wife, as it is with my mom. Three women in my life whom I love very much, but they all three bring out a different part of me because the nature of the relationship is different. I shapeshift.
Right.
So the image of the animal and all that, that's basically part of that whole instrument we used or was used to describe this element.
Right.
Whether Don Juan actually did or not, I wasn't there presently to witness it.
Sure. Right.
Or my dad do it the same. But I'm aware of my own experience, and up to this point, my experience is that.
It supports that is certainly within the realm of possibility based off of just your understanding of the way reality is constructed, right?
Yeah, I can say I myself haven't changed to a dog or a coyote or a crow, but I have been able to let go of the mask and become aware of that, and is what we know as control folly. And basically, I control the folly, which is basically knowledge. That's basically another way of calling it. I control, and that's where it comes the mastery of self. I control me. I control my perception. I control my body. I control the direction I want to go in life. I control my will.
Right.
And one of the things I control is the perception of how I see myself. So it's the difference is this. I either see myself through a definition or I see myself through the experience of being me. One is the truth. The other is just a reflection of that truth.
Right. Very, very insightful. Well, Miguel, this has been absolutely fascinating. I mean, for those who would like to connect with you and continue to follow your work, obviously your new book has recently come out, Mastery of Self. And of course, before that, you had the 5 level of attachments. And I'm sure I could go on and on with you on this stuff. And maybe we'll circle back around and do another one of these to dig in further, because this has been excellent to have the opportunity to pick your brain. What's the best way for people to connect with you if they want to do so?
You can find me in my homepage, which is MiguelRuizJr.com. That's MiguelRuizJr.com. Okay. You can also find me in my dad's MiguelRuiz.com website. And of course, we have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter is part of the whole structure of the dream nowadays. But I'm really active. Exactly. I'm really active on Instagram. I enjoy that part. I like sharing pictures. Right, but you earlier today you asked me about serendipity, and there's a lot of them, but the one I usually get, and is the one that is the most reoccurring, is I tend to sing the song before it starts airing on the radio, or a TV episode. I think of I'm sitting there just thinking, all of a sudden I think of a Scooby-Doo episode, or I think about a Morrissey song or something, or Prince. And all of a sudden, a few minutes later, it plays on the radio or plays on TV. Yeah, just like that. It's sometimes it happens with people, or sometimes it happens with what I'm about to say. Like, it happens a lot with my wife. Both she and I find ourselves thinking the same thing, and one of us says it. I'm like, I was just thinking that.
Right.
So there's a lot in my life that's something, whether it's serendipity or not, I'm not sure, but what it is that it's intuition it's a form of perception that has nothing to do with the mind.
Right.
And it's just allowing that to be. Now, am I seeing to the future or nothing? I don't know. I'm just perceiving something differently before it happens. Or maybe I'm just perceiving what is about to happen, or simply I'm just like, maybe I'm just willing it to happen. Who knows? And more importantly, it's like my dad loves to say, who cares? It's happening. Yeah, you see, what I mean by that, the lesson my dad taught me about who cares is that I can create a story and trying to explain it. And then it comes to a point where I believe the story more than the truth. And I lose the truth. And the only thing that remains is the story.
Yeah.
The who cares is just a way to stop telling the story and just remembering the actual experience without the story. And that's the experience is the truth.
Right. It's more authentic, right?
Well, it's what we perceived.
Very fascinating, Miguel. Thank you again for taking the time to connect with myself and the listeners here on this podcast. And one last question, final question I would like to leave you with that I always leave off. 60 seconds or less. What is the meaning of life, according to Don Miguel Ruiz Jr.?
To enjoy life, to enjoy everything we do. I'm the youngest I will ever be, which means I can go in any direction in life, which means I get to choose which path I want to take. And that's beauty. So the purpose of life is to create, to enjoy the people I love, to enjoy the kiss and the embrace of my wife, to enjoy the hugs and the laughter with my kids, to enjoy the good run I have with my dear friend Brian, and him and I go on runs, to have a good glass of wine with my neighbors, to have a good cup of coffee with my wife, to enjoy going out to a restaurant, to enjoy watching the beach, to enjoy everything I do.
Yeah. Well, I have no doubt that whatever you choose from this point forward in your dream will be beautiful to behold, and I certainly will keep watching and being inspired. So thank you so much for your inspiration, Miguel.
Brandon, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. You know, we talked for an hour and 20, and I know we could have easily gone 4 more hours.
Exactly.
Easy.
Exactly. Well, part 2 and 3 will be down the road, perhaps. And
I'm down. Let's do it.
I really, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for all that you do and sharing with me here. Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting, your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world. Because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.